You are tuned in to the OTDUDE podcast, a podcast that explores how to live a richer, fuller, more meaningful life through occupational therapy. My name is Jeff, and I'm a licensed occupational therapist practicing in the United States. My goal for this show is to learn about my guests' stories, their passion, struggles, successes, insights, and everything in between. You can support this podcast by sharing it with your friends on social media, writing a review, and even considering being a guest yourself on the show. If you're interested, visit otdude.com/podcast to connect with me. Also, if you're a visual person, there's a video version of this podcast on the OTDUDE YouTube channel. Above all, thanks for being here and tuning in. On today's episode, Erica and I had a wonderful discussion about our compassion and passion for OT, being humble, evidence-informed practice, finding our own professional identity despite outside forces in healthcare, avoiding burnout, exposure therapy for teenagers, assistive technology to make our clients shine, and how families can be a useful resource to glue the pieces together for our clients to maximize their participation in meaningful occupations. My guest today is Erica Patusco, and she has been an occupational therapist for over 10 years with pediatrics, adults, and geriatric care background. She recently settled into the role of school occupational therapy in a public high school and for kids with special needs in New York. Erica graduated from Keene University with a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology and a Master of Science in OT. At 17 years old, she started working in physical medicine and rehab practice, and that's where she developed a passion for nutrition and fitness, maintaining an active lifestyle, and physical and occupational therapy. Erica specializes not only in pediatric care from birth to late teenage years, but she has a strong foundation in disease management, sports injury, corrective movement, and adult and geriatric wellness care. That's a whole lot because, well, she's got over 10 years of experience, and I'd love to learn about her experiences, her insights in the current state of OT and what she's passionate about, really. So with that, I'm going to patch Erica on right now. So, hey, Erica, how's it going?
Good. How are you, Jeff?
I'm doing great. I just did some decorating actually before I got you on. I was looking at my video camera. You can't see it's off screen, but I was like, I don't think I want that on camera because I kind of moved. So I did some decorating. I printed out my logo just to cover it up for now. And it's so I'm doing great. My environment is making me comfortable. Yeah. So first question I'd like to ask everybody, tell me about yourself and how you found OT.
I've been in practice for over 10 years. I've really covered most populations. I also did recently graduate with my doctorate back in May from Bay Path University. So I did add that to my experience. So I have a story, like most of us do, on how I found OT. I was actually enrolled in fashion school while I was working for this multidisciplinary practice, fashion marketing and merchandising. I knew that I wanted to work with the public, and I really wanted to make people feel good about themselves. And what better way than, fashion and clothing. But I wasn't sure if my heart was really in the fashion industry. By nature, I happen to be a very passionate person, and my heart needed to be into whatever career I was going to do. So my boss at the time, his best friend, happened to be an occupational therapist. And he said, you know what, Erica, you love fitness, nutrition. He's like, but you're very creative and passionate. I think you need to go hang out with my best friend. Well, I instantly fell in love with what defined occupational therapy, what it was about, that there was actually a profession out there that, really took a holistic, whole body approach. And it just resonated so much with me and my goals or my dreams for what my lifelong career really should be about. So I enrolled into OT school. Never forgot my interview when I told the professor that I was coming from fashion school. And she's like, okay, so give me your definition of OT. And I poured my heart and soul out. That's how connected I felt in the time that I observed this occupational therapist and everything that he told me about what it really means to be an OT. And she like couldn't believe that someone's coming from a completely different area and had this description of, what OT was.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think there's a lot of parallels in like the way you described it, like the creativity part and, making people happy. It's functional. We have like functional clothing. I know some fashion is not functional, it's just like aesthetic, but it's very creative and it works on the psychology, right? You make people feel good. So it's like OT is like the same thing, but instead of working with, something more like design or like, yeah, like design, right? Like from what I understand, it's directly the person and what they're like wearing in their shoes. So I'm glad you found OT because, the creativity part, I think, is one of the things that drew me to it as well. So with your background, I understand psychology. So do you think you use that in OT? Because OT is so mentally health, like our foundations, our roots in it. In your practice, can you tell me a bit more about that?
I think it correlates 100%. When I took my mental health courses at King University, my professor had said to me, Erica, I promise you everything that you will learn in this semester, you will use for the rest of your career. And I thought she was crazy. Yeah, I wanted to do sports rehab. How could that correlate? What does, mental health have anything to do with it? What does psychology have anything to do with it? And that was the best advice that someone has ever given me. I feel that I wouldn't be so successful as a clinician if I didn't have strong ties to psychology.
Mm.
I feel that the mind, when we're implementing an intervention, right, our clients, it's not physically what they're doing, it's the mind. And the mind
Hmm.
has to be in that moment. The mind needs to believe that they can get better, believe that this intervention is going to work. And that's what makes them the most successful. And for us as occupational therapists, our success comes from building a rapport with who we work with, having them trust you.
Hmm.
It's giving them the confidence. It's reestablishing occupations, after a disability where they think that life is over. It's really not over. Maybe we have to change the way that you do something, but you can still do it. Maybe we have to break that goal or that task down and have you be successful at multiple parts of it, but maybe not the whole thing, but you're still successful. You're still engaging in that occupation. And the first way to do that is to make them psychologically believe that they can. And just because life has changed doesn't mean life ends for them.
Yeah, that's a good, really well. I can tell you did really well in your interview for that's it's like, oh, I want to work with you. No, that's such a good way to put it. Like, you can't just like go through the motions, like of whatever occupation it is. Well, maybe sleep, but even then, like you gotta, like you gotta want to sleep. You can't be like, I'm like trying to stay up and like you're not getting a rest. So your mind's gotta be in it like 100% no matter with what you do. And I think
Yes.
that is one of the draws with OT. It's like it is so holistic and we see the big picture and how all the occupations play a role like at the end of the day and considered, then that's the theme that I'm seeing. Like a lot of people are not achieving what they want or they're not, getting the best out of life, which is why OT is so cool.
And the purpose.
Yes.
As occupational therapists, we have a why. Why are we implementing something? Why are we doing something? There's an end goal to it.
Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
think that emotional, mental connection to,
Yeah.
what we're trying to do and what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, as humans, like that's kind of the cool thing is we all have some type of human connection like that connects us. Like at the end of the day, even because something as basic as ADLs, like eating, it's like we can all connect on some level, and that is why I think OT is so cool, and how we can, I think probably why we can as therapists connect ourselves so like easily, because we can be like so relatable, and we all have some experience of some story to share or something that connects us. I wanted to ask about your experience in working with some of the younger age groups, like more specifically, maybe like pediatrics, but not even just pediatrics, but like maybe like newborns. Do you have like any experience with that? Because to me, it's such that concept of like what OT would do. Like I understand like it involves like, like the bond between the mom, breastfeeding, things like that. So, but from your experience, like do you have any stories or insights from that?
From my own personal perspective, uh, within this age group, it's more of supporting a parent. Um, Again, that psychology comes into play. Here they are presented with, their infant, their child, that is going to live maybe permanently with a disability or be delayed in some way from among their peers. And how do you support this mom or parent or a caregiver in facilitating the achievements of some of these milestones?
Mm,
It's hard enough being a parent for the first time, but now you're trying to understand a disability that or a condition that you've maybe never heard of, never been presented with. So there's a lot of dynamic there. And how do we care? Teaching the parent to care for themselves is number one. I do a lot of that, providing them with activities to support achieving some of these milestones, whether it be gross motor, whether it be sensory, fine motor. How do we modify the environment for success?
yeah.
So I feel like, within this age range, it's more of coaching for me
Hmm.
and more of, positioning, adapting, maybe, seating, where's the child resting, and, how are things being conducted within the home. In my own personal experience, dealing with, when you get closer to the age of 1 or 2, dealing with the emotional regulation and, outbursts and meltdowns, and how do we do this, and trying to be a successful parent.
Yeah. I was
Yeah.
thinking about it. I'm a relatively new parent. I'm a relatively 2-year-old, right? So I was talking to my wife about it, and I was like, hey, we didn't like get a handbook for like how to be parents, and like we didn't go to school for how to be
Right.
parents. Even if on the best of cases, like, and your child is like normal, so to speak, it's like even then you sometimes don't know what to do. And then you add like the psychological components of like not knowing basically about a condition, and it's like adds like a whole nother layer to it. It's why it's so important for like practitioners like OT to do what they do to address like the holistic picture, and really, like you said, support the parents and like coach them and help them and guide them along the way, based on what they need.
And remind them that maybe their child is a little bit different, and all of us develop at different times, and in different ways. And we can't compare to other siblings. We can't compare to our families. We can't compare to our friends' children. Each child, each human is really unique and individual. And I try to remind them that stop making comparisons,
Yes.
because
Yeah.
it's we're all different.
That is such a good point. It was like I was like listening to a podcast, a mental health one, and they were talking about comparisons. And I was like, had my kid there, and I was like looking around. I was like, oh wow, like dad is like playing like softball with this kid, and there's like he's like one or something. No, like not one, but like a toddler. And I was like, here I am, like listening to my podcast. I'm like trying to be mindful. I'm like playing with them. I was like comparing. I was like, okay, I need to stop. Like it's like entirely different kid. I don't even know like their story, and it's like it's so natural for us to compare. I think
Okay.
there's so much that goes into it. It's like such a like interesting topic, like this development in the conditions, and then the psychology, and then the physical function. I love it. I don't even know why I'm not doing pediatrics. Maybe I should
I
switch
feel
over it.
like, what's normal? There is no normal.
Exactly.
There's no normal. If, parents ask me all the time, what should I look for that signifies a normal development in my child? There is none. There's none. We
Exactly.
just, some kids take a little bit longer.
How about the next age group, teenagers?
When I switched over to, pediatrics and now currently working in a public school, my this population I never thought was going to be the one that I'm the most passionate about. And here I am, entering the OT world, talking about rehab and geriatrics and sports injuries and all these movement and kinesiotaping and, all kinds of somehow fitness and wellness related. This population has entirely stolen my heart. It is where I have shined the most as a clinician in myself. So this population, I agree, goes unnoticed, but it's a crucial time in someone's life. Here's the transition from adolescence to now adulthood. And this is where we're learning independence. How are we taking care of ourselves? For years, these individuals are in a very controlled environment,
Structure.
right? So they're coming the structure, home, school, home, school. So there is structure. Now it's, well, what happens now? What happens when they turn 18, 19 years old? So from the age, I believe from 13 to about at 18, they're crucial for developing functional skills, IADLs, maximizing their potential in society. They
Yes.
have so much to offer. It's a person living with a disability. It's not the disability. They are more than capable if they are given the tools, if they are given the strategies to be successful. They can work, they can learn, they can take care of themselves, and we need to stop handicapping them.
Hmm.
And I feel like the handicapping is really coming from a good place. It's of protection, but they can be. And the emotional, cognitive, the physical changes that occur. And us as clinicians, this is where we shine and where we, build our rapport and we give them the confidence and we help simplify their lives and enhance their lifestyle, right, for success and to be integrated amongst their peers so they don't feel different
That's
because it can happen.
that outside the norm thing again, and like how it can really wear on someone's psychology.
And, we can also mention how the world has changed and the dynamics in the world that we live in. And this just makes it a little bit harder.
Mhm.
And if they're given the accommodations, if they're provided the strategies, they can fit in, they can play sports. This is the age group where they become self-aware and a lot of them recognize the differences amongst their peers. So
Yeah.
how do we as clinicians help them integrate, and be part of, as we're saying, the norm,
Right.
or have them accept that their differences makes them just a little more special.
Yeah. Totally agree. Like like a
Yeah.
diagnosis, because that's kind of like a label. And I've heard some podcasts where some people, even like OTs, they found out like later in life that they may have like ADHD or something. And I think it goes both ways personally. It depends on how where you take it. But what do you have any experiences with kids maybe who have been like recently diagnosed working with them in OT? I know I'm putting you on the spot.
No, yes, yes, I have. And I've known parents that withhold that information.
Mm.
And then in their teenage years, they do let them know, or they start to ask questions, why am I like this? Why do I feel this way?
Mhm.
And I have entered cases during that period of time. And I actually am working with someone now. And how we talk about, we have this personal approach to our interventions or relatability. and that's how I started my first session with this one client. And I said to her, I said, "Hey, listen," I was like, "Miss Erica," I said, she's kind of quirky. She sometimes has a hard time paying attention, and this is her strategy. This is what she does, and it's not weird. It's just you're different. You're
Mhm.
different, and it's fine. Can I help you feel a little more normal? Can I give you some, little tips on how to control that feeling?" And
Yeah.
as soon as that happened, like, "Miss Erica, do you get that?" And I'm like, "I get it."
Because you were a teenager before.
I was a teenager before, and now children are being labeled, right? And maybe when I was growing up, we really weren't, but those issues were there. They were present.
Yeah.
We just didn't pay much attention to them at that time.
Yeah.
And what strategies did I use that were successful for me? And a lot of my interventions with these teenagers really come from my own personal experience or asking, my peers, my colleagues, and I want their personal perspective on, you know, I say, "Hey, do you have, issues with, paying attention?" Or I have, maybe some kind of like these obsessive compulsive tendencies.
Yeah.
Like I have to do this a certain way, or, I can't focus. And how did you deal with those? And I'm blessed enough to work in a school with the most amazing, amazing group of clinicians, where they are very relatable. They're very open, and we're definitely a family. So I'm fortunate to be able
Supportive.
to get that information. Um,
Yeah.
but I can also add in is, having just wrapped up my doctorate, that evidence-based approach. And if I'm not getting it from my peers, I'm looking at that research. I'm reading. I'm constantly trying to one up my intervention, to one up, the people around me, to have my clients be the most successful. So
No, you're literally giving me goosebumps because it's like so vital and important that we look and integrate all these into our, what's the term now? Evidence informed practice, where you
yeah,
integrate your own personal experience, expertise, opinion, and as well as the research, but also like factor in, like you said, the parents and who we're actually directly working with. And that is what builds the big picture of what intervention you should do. What you're doing is like really a good model for what OTs should be doing, like in practice.
thank you. And I, was gonna say that I know we have a lot of new practitioners or maybe OT students that do listen to your podcasts, and we're not supposed to know everything.
Hmm.
As clinicians, I feel like we graduate, we pass our boards, and you instantly think that you're never supposed to say, "I don't know." No,
Hmm.
you are. You are supposed to say, "I don't know." And our schooling and our programs and capstones teach us how to find the answers. And it is in that evidence-based research. It's reading, it's talking to our peers, talking to different disciplines. It helps us say, "Hey, I don't know, but my schooling taught me, where am I going to find these answers?"
Yeah.
And it allows us to be more comfortable. And I think it took me the first 5 years to really grasp that, and to finally be okay with saying, like, "I don't know, but I'm going to look into that, or I'm going to find that answer."
Yeah. It takes a whole lot
Or
to admit that.
yeah,
Yeah.
to admit that.
Yeah.
So I do agree. Our programs and my doctorate program definitely really solidified is where do we find the answers? Because we're presented with different issues every single time, every new case.
Hmm.
Sometimes an old case, something changes in their life. Maybe the disease progresses, and now you have to adapt a little bit more.
Yeah.
There's a lot. There's a lot.
We're always learning. And I think in
Yeah.
OT, it's like such a cool way of learning too. Cause like we get to put that into our like toolbox that's in our head of like how we can use it for like not just working with clients, but like in our own personal lives. Once you learn about it, it's kind of like it opens up your world so much.
Yeah. Yes, both professionally and personally. I'm very humbled by what we do and the people that we meet along the way.
I'm curious to learn more about your role in your current role as in public school, in like the team that you're working with. Do you have any stories that come to mind, or what's it like a day in the life too? It's like a loaded question.
From the close up perspective, my day to day, my goal is to make the kids that I work with feel successful, smile, feel proud, feel like they've achieved something because they're learning, they're trying to learn. Subjects are difficult, but can I present them with a task or a goal or something that they want to learn or achieve and help them be successful at that? Or give them just the time to step away from what's difficult for them and regulate their emotions, teaching them how to, things come up from day to day. So I try to have the kids that I work with socialize, work in groups, bring them into rooms where there's other people, there's other students, and how do we talk? And does what anything can occur? Is there feelings of anger because somebody pushed me, Erica? And what do I do? It's like, okay, hey, let's talk about this. How are we going to deal with this? So my day to day and up close is making them walk away from me feeling successful.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what it is, but when they walk away with a smile and say, hey, I did that. And anything. And my big picture is making them successful in the real world. This is my biggest dream. This is my biggest goal. I have these dreams of starting vocational programs to allow them to earn a living and to socialize and be productive out in society and not be kept from the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They have so much to share and so much joy, and I'm, as you can see in my face, I just light up when I talk about, the setting that I work in and giving them that opportunity.
Do you think there are not many of these opportunities? Like, even ask me, if I've been just thinking about it, I was like, I don't even know. It's like, if I have a kiddo with condition, like, I don't know, autism, for example, it's like, what kind of supports would there be after the typical like high school? It's like such a big jump. And then like society, I feel like doesn't have the supports, and then they may be stigmatized. And it's like, and it's a really new thing, I think, for the public to really understand. Like, we as OTs have like really like worked with this, and we have provided supports, but like, it's such a big challenge. And how would you go about it? Like, if you had like all the resources in the world, like, how would you go about achieving that kind of dream for this age group?
I would do more life skills instead of teaching them how to read a novel or a passage and just read it. Do they understand it? Let's talk about, can they read a menu? Can they read prices, how much something costs when they go shopping? Can they read directions on how to make pancakes? I don't know.
Yeah.
Reading the back of oatmeal. Like, how do we make oatmeal? How do we use a microwave? How do we, technology? How do we use these things?
Yeah.
And I feel like our traditional, education system kind of leaves out, also those real world and real life experiences. Is, yes, can they read, but can they read the menu for
Mm-hmm.
to order food?
Exactly. And like,
Do they know money? Do you know that this is $1? How many quarters make $1? So I do a lot of this interacting. How do we
yeah,
pay for something? How do we ask for something? How do we ask for help?
the world that they see is so different. And it's not that it's a weakness or anything, but it's just different, like you're saying. And like all these practical skills that even like when we go to like OT school, I was like, okay, I'm gonna learn how to do this and like work with this population. I'm gonna have like this skill set, like in PT, like manual therapy. But in OT,
Yes.
I feel like a lot of it is so left out in terms of the actual practical education. But that's also such a big strength, I think. I don't see that as like a shortcoming of like OT education. Like, you just recently did your OTD. Like, you probably didn't learn about how to teach kids how to count change, right? But it's like, it's the foundation and the theory and the premise and the reason behind it is where we can, like we talk about how we are creative. Like you talked about like your fashion thing. It's like, that's where I think OT allows us to look at it in such a different way. Because if all OT programs, for example, like taught like the same thing and it's like one way of doing it, and it's like, we're not being holistic and looking at group differences and how we can make the individual shine, which is like very heavy.
Yes. I think it's what you were saying, where we always have to go back to our foundational skills. This is, I've mentored a lot of new grads, level two field work supervisor also. And that's the one thing is, they always ask me, but how do you treat the individual? How do you make them shine? How do you know? And I always say, it boils down to one thing. It's, where are your foundational skills? And you always have to go back. It's the theory and applying that
Yeah.
and looking for their strengths, someone's strengths, and then using that to your advantage. So maybe they can't do A, but they could do B.
Yeah.
So now we're going to say, and honest, I'm very honest clinician with all the clients that I work with. And I try to explain to them, I try not to sugarcoat as much as I can, and tell them, my goal is really to make you shine. So yes, you want to do this, and maybe we can't get there, but guess what? We could do this,
Yeah.
and you're going to shine and you're going to be independent and you're going to totally rock that. And having them see that energy and knowing that, and own that. If that answers the question,
Yeah. Oh my
their
gosh.
friends maybe are playing football. Can they play football? I don't know, but we're going to find something that you love. And how are you going to spend your time? It's something that brings you joy, and it's exposure. I do a lot of exposure with these kids because whether they have been told that they can't, they have never been given that opportunity to try, and I'm like, hey, have you ever played, I don't know, soccer? Have you ever played
Yeah.
tennis? Do you like to draw? Oh, no. I'm like, you sure? Did you ever try? Like, let's go do this. It's amazing how much there's a lack of exposure. And this is where I say funding some programs to give them exposure and educating parents. It's so important. And you can't necessarily blame a parent. Again, they just don't know.
Yeah.
You don't expect this. And it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
Your child can still have a enriched life, be
Totally.
happy,
Yeah.
live their own lives, and we need to expose them.
Having these resources to expose them is like so important, even if it's like very surface level. It opens up their mind to their potential and what they can do, and like it's limitless with like one's like confidence that they build with something as obscure as like that they didn't even think about.
Exposure.
Yeah. It'd be cool if like, I don't know, like parents like are really into like supporting their kids, it's like there should be like this, maybe there is like programs to expose these kids to these types of different things, and then they go through it, and like maybe there are like a lot of different options with like just like really low expectations of exposing them to, I don't know, something like these days it's like coding or something. It's like, wow, that's so cool. Like I wouldn't have even thought about that. Like kids are like learning that, and then that hones in on their skills that they didn't even know they had, like being able to code or draw or like do things so differently with the same set of skills, but like packaged in a different way, like for life.
Right. I have a client that I work with now who she loved to draw, and I said to myself, in the world that we live in technology, like, hey, do you ever think of making this digital? And, what do you think about developing video games and graphic arts? And now it's like that's all she talks about. And her parents bought her this iPad and this app where she can integrate that and her love of drawing. And I took something so simple of her drawing on a piece of paper and said, hey, did you ever think of this? Why don't we give it a shot? Why don't you try it? And her dad happened to, be an IT
Uh huh.
person. So it worked out well. And, I talked to him and I was like, you think, what do you think if we get her into this and maybe try to find her a program that's simple enough for her to use? Well, she shows me her artwork and all these digital comics and all kinds of things that she's creating. And guess what? She shines and she's confident and she doesn't feel so different because she owns that,
Yeah.
and that's her identity and helping them find their own identity.
Yeah. Wow. I love that story.
So,
How like
yeah.
everything was there that you helped connect the pieces. Like the dad was in IT and the kid had interest, but you kind of like connected the low tech to the high tech in terms of like the assistive technology. And then it's like, then she's like taken off, like she's on her own. Like you discharge her from services. Like she found her skill set and her interest and her passion.
Because I say at the end of the day, as a clinician and us as occupational therapists, we are facilitators. We aren't necessarily the problem solvers, but we are the facilitator. And
Yeah.
we encourage and we adapt and we throw out strategies out there. But it's the individual themselves, that are doing all the work. And every
Mhm.
time I get thanked for, doing my job, I'm like, me? I'm like, no, it's you. The
Yeah.
hard part was you. I was just kind of throwing stuff out there. You made it happen.
Yeah.
I just gave you the idea, and
Yeah.
helped you put the pieces together.
That's such a good way. I think that especially new clinicians and students, yeah, there may be all this pressure, which is understandable for them to like be like this like high level, like being perceived as like the expert or like the know everything or know how to solve a problem. And that can put so much pressure on the clinician. And maybe my hypothesis is like what's like leading to like this burnout where it's like in like this imposter syndrome. And but it's okay. Like we're all just guiding the patient and we're all lifelong learners, just that we're all at different kind of places and on our own journey, and for a patient it can just be just a little bit of nudge away from, something like misuse of leisure, like going and turning to drugs or like things that are like less productive and meaningful to them that like drugs exactly like OT is about that you really need to do, and you're helping someone engage in those meaningful occupations for that group. And it can be so simple too. New grads are listening to this. What do you think is some of the takeaways that they can kind of get and to help guide them in their process?
The most success that I've gotten in my career so far is my compassion and my passion for what I do every day. I've not forgotten my why and why I started my journey in occupational therapy. And healthcare has changed, and the environment, the world, and the dynamics within our profession has changed. But there's one thing that none of that can take from me. And it is my passion for helping people be successful and making them shine. And as a new clinician, the advice that I give is to always stay humble. Always stay humble. It doesn't matter how much experience you have, you still don't know everything. And someone younger than you might know. Someone
Hmm.
with less experience might have something to share that's going to help your patient or your client be successful. And just always, always, always stay humble and always stay true to what OT really is and why you did it. And there's going to be a lot of people around you that are going to try to change that.
Hmm.
And you have to be confident in why you entered this profession. You don't just bump into OT. Maybe there are people out there who've always wanted to be an OT, but for me, I never knew what it was. And a lot of my peers also, they have some kind of a personal story to why they became an OT. And hold that. You have to hold that close to your heart, no matter how much people are trying to change how you practice and what you do. And I say this every single day to myself, and it's become a little bit of a joke amongst my coworkers. And they say, as soon as I walk out to go treat, and when I did all of my settings, it's just always what defines me. It's they say, there goes Erica, she's about to go save the world. And
Aw.
I say, that's it. I wake up every day because I'm trying to save the world.
That's such a
And this is what I hold true since I graduated OT school. And
wow.
nobody's going to take it from me. It's
Yeah.
not going to change. I have clinicians that I've worked with, even old bosses, and they somehow through social media or somehow find me and reconnect, and they will say, "Hey, Eric, are you still trying to save the world?" I said, "You betcha. I'm still trying, and I'm going to keep trying to save the world."
Yeah.
So
That is such a powerful and like grounding like ability and like I wouldn't say coping, but like just a way to give you it's just like so huge I can't even put into words, but it makes so much sense intuitively and it's so easy to lose sight of that and get caught up in the weeds of like what things are like in the real world, how things are going and lose sight of your own internal passion and motivation and reason, the why. That's a really good tip that I'm going to use. I'm going to keep close to my heart. That's awesome. It's time for our lightning questions. And I like to ask these to everybody because it's, I don't know, it's like, it kind of goes into why you chose OT too. So, how would you describe OT to a stranger on the street that went up like, hey, Erica, you're trying to save the world. Well, what do you do exactly?
my true definition about OT is about helping someone live their life to the fullest, regardless of what has changed in their life. So helping someone to adapt to that change, and whether that means I'm changing, their environment to do something. So I always say, think about what you do every day: getting dressed, going to the bathroom, eating, working. Playing sports or whatever makes you happy, what brings you joy in your life. My job is to help you to continue to do that each and every day. And whether I have to change something within your environment or the way that you do it, my goal is to make you successful at doing that.
That's awesome. That's really well put. I think I totally agree with the way you describe it. It's just like, it's so huge and it's such a important thing that our clients can benefit from. With that said, what's your personal favorite occupation?
I know this is a tough one. In most recent times, I will say rest, rest and sleep and self care.
Yeah.
A lot has changed in healthcare. A lot has changed, and I keep saying in the world. And as clinicians, we can't allow burnout. We need to take care of ourselves so that we can help not only take care of our clients and our patients, but our own families. People that count on us. And there is always somebody that needs you, that needs your smile, that needs you to listen, that needs you to just your presence. But if you don't take care of yourself and you don't allow rest, then you're just going to burn out.
Yeah.
And this is from my own personal experience. I was working two jobs, trying to get my doctorate, writing my dissertation, and it was a lot. It was a lot, and I definitely took myself to the max.
Hmm.
And I put myself not second, but like third and fourth, and I suffered from that. And it's now become my goal to also support not only new grads but also OT students,
Yeah.
and taking care of themselves, because had someone given me some of these coping strategies, I think I would have been a little more successful.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have struggled. Let me say this: I wouldn't have struggled. I still achieved my goal, but I wouldn't have struggled. My quality of life would have been better during that period of time.
Sometimes you just gotta use OT for yourself. It's easy.
Yes.
That's what I've been guilty of, not remembering to do that. And just, is there something that you read recently? You talked about the research that you've been doing, and then like sometimes when you dive into it, what's something interesting that you want like to share with our audience that you read about or learned about?
So my go-to, uh, I say my spiritual book, which has supported my self-care, and I've lent out to actually a lot of new clinicians. It's called The Four Agreements by Miguel Ruiz, and I actually just recently lent it out to a new OT grad. And I always say that this is how you're going to live and this is how you practice by. So if you've never read it, go out there, get it. It's an easy read. He has a lot of other books about, relationships and dealing with our own insecurities and how we need to look within ourselves. And being clinicians, how are you going to make someone believe you if you don't believe in yourself?
Yeah.
It all starts with us. And I think in my over 10 years of practice, this is more towards the tail end, that I've really learned that, it's not what can I memorize in a book. It starts with me.
Yeah. And it's just that simple. You just gotta
Yeah.
maybe open up your interview questions and what you said, or reflect on that and the why, and that's really all it takes, and that kind of guides you everywhere else in terms of self-care and career and whatever it may be, and how imposter syndrome, burnout. It's just like, it's that
Yes.
simple and so powerful too at the same time. What would you say, last question, is the takeaway from today's episode, if you can kind of summarize it? It's like a lot of nuggets in there and like good stuff.
I would say that focus on how do we take all that we learn in school and along the ways in our career, and how do we take all of this information and put it into practice individually to the person that we're working with, and how, as we've said a couple of times, is how do we make them shine?
Hmm.
How do we use this plethora of information and hone in on one person and individualize our treatment and try to maximize our interview questions and take away what's important to them. And, we talked about a lot of different things, but I feel like the major theme is, passion and individualization, and, our clients and our patients are human beings. Relatability it is
Yeah.
really the key to success.
Yeah.
Relate and be humble. And we come out of school and the expectations are set so high. Maybe we set them high for ourselves, and I do. I'm known to be a perfectionist, but as time goes on and the more people we meet and the people that we work with, I mentioned it, they humble you.
Yeah.
They humble you. And everybody that I work with, whether it's a caregiver, whether it's the patient or the person themselves, I always take away some life lesson.
Yeah.